Which player on the Washington Commanders should you be buying in your dynasty leagues? We're talking all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Dynasty.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Matt Williamson and Ryan McDowell.
Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan McDowell. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Joining me as always is Matt Williamson. Find Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Matt, how's it going?
It's going really well, and I'm just going to pull back the curtain here. I think we have mixed feelings on this team.
Yeah.
They're not the sexiest team out there, the Washington Commanders, obviously. But I think they reinforce the interior of their offensive line. I think they have above average weapons overall with pretty defined roles. It's not a real muddy backfield. It's not a real muddy group of receivers. It is a muddy quarterback situation, obviously, but there's also a new owner. I mean, will either one of these quarterbacks fit the owner's needs 1 year from now, or is he going to put a mandate out, go get your guy, kind of like Carolina did? And I also think it's interesting, and I'm not implying he's the next Andy Reid, but Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator, to me, is a little bit of an underrated thing here to look at and say, okay, I can kind of get behind this team a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I'm interested to see what Bieniemy can do, and of course, I mean, we've talked about him. He leaves the Chiefs pretty clearly to kind of prove he can succeed and do it without Patrick Mahomes, without Andy Reid, and I mean, I'm going to be rooting for him, and I'm definitely, honestly, just glad to see an ownership change in Washington as well. I think most people would agree with that, obviously. But I don't know if I can agree with you. Did you say an above average group of weapons?
Yeah,
here?
When that fell out of my mouth, I should have said average.
average would be kind. Let's name the names before we start giving them some labels. Looking at our current DLF ADP, these are the players that are worthy of a roster spot. Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 24. Jahan Dotson, wide receiver 35. Brian Robinson, RB 32, Antonio Gibson, a little bit of positive coach speak on him lately. He's the RB 40. Curtis Samuel, wide receiver 88. Chris Rodriguez, the rookie. You know where he's from, Matt?
I do. Yeah, I kind of like him too. Yeah,
another Kentucky boy. He's RB 75. And Sam Howell is the quarterback 33. So that's it. That is the list of players that Matt Williamson calls above average. No, I'm just joking. Just joking. Let's get into him here, though. Who are you buying? Which one of these players do you really want on your dynasty roster?
See, I've been doing this to you a couple times where I go off the grid. I think Jacoby Brissett's a really good player and really impressed me with the Browns. And obviously, this is super flex heavy.
Sure.
I just think he's somebody I want on every super flex roster and is going to get opportunities for the next 5 to 8 years. Probably in limited capacity, but we know that has value. And I think he might beat out Howell when it's all said and done, or 3 weeks in when Howell's struggling, they go to Brissett. He might be the best backup in the whole league.
Yeah, I don't mind that one at all. Obviously, as you said, with a super flex slant there.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of Howell. There seems to be a lot of dynasty players and Washington fans as well, really excited about him. Look at him as a guy who has a lot of upside. Of course, if you go back early in his college career, Matt, we've talked about kind of the influence of Devy and Devy leagues on dynasty players. He was a player who looked like a surefire top 2 or 3 quarterback in his class. And, eventually that he kind of fell off, or I shouldn't say he fell off, but we were just wrong, right? We were just wrong about how the NFL viewed him because he didn't get that draft capital that we expected for so long. Yet still now has a shot or seemingly has a shot to be a starter in the league. I'm not looking at this Washington team and assuming that he is the starter. I think Brissett could still win that job. Although again, we talk about the coach speak and you get a lot of it this time of year. It seems like they're strongly backing Sam Howell as the guy there and really hoping he runs away with the job. I just don't know that that's going to happen.
I do think all ties will go to Howell.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. So yeah, like I said, in a super flex league, I don't mind the call of Jacoby Brissett. Obviously he's going to be cheap. Didn't get drafted in our one quarterback ADP, probably for good reason. I'm going to go with Jahan Dotson here. And I'm a little hesitant to do it because he has gained quite a bit of value, even compared to last season, despite the injury that he dealt with during his rookie year. He ended up playing just 12 games and he's the wide receiver 35. As I said, he's above Jamison Williams and Christian Kirk and some veterans like Evans and Hopkins and Allen. I wouldn't say he's undervalued by any means. Maybe closer to overvalued than undervalued, but I don't mind the ADP. And obviously we like the age, still just turned 23 years old and, has a chance to be a star receiver here for years to come. You know, I said he only played 12 games. That was enough to lead this team in touchdowns. He had 7 of them as a rookie. Terry McLaurin had just 5. So I'm intrigued with Jahan Dotson's upside. What do you think about him?
I really, really like him as a football player. I mean, I'll concede that his situation's not perfect.
Right.
And I didn't think he'd go as high in the first round as he did. I think he's a really good player that goes over the middle, plays bigger than he is. I think touchdowns aren't fluky for him. Really good route runner. No, he's going to come up later for me, but I'm a believer and I want him. I have one more name I want to throw out on the buys real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Boy, have I been burned on Antonio Gibson. I think you have as well.
Yes.
But he's running back 40 now in a backfield that's two-headed. And how many million times did we say, I wonder what Antonio Gibson could be if J.D. McKissick isn't there? J.D. McKissick isn't there. Is he going to be the receiving back?
I mean, you look at the 3 running backs that we've named here, Brian Robinson, Gibson, and the rookie Chris Rodriguez. And as a UK fan, I can tell you Chris Rodriguez sure won't be the receiving back. Robinson will not either. We can talk about those 2 guys soon. But Gibson, you would think, is going to get a shot to catch more passes, to be more involved in the offense. That's what we've heard from Ron Rivera, even as recently as the past week. And RB40, as you said, he's behind Khalil Herbert and James Conner and Tajay Spears and Roshan Johnson. Maybe a little undervalued there. Seems like dynasty managers are starting to give up on the guy. And I mean, I guess I could understand why. I think he's going to be even cheaper to acquire and trade than that ADP might suggest.
Yeah, people just don't like him anymore because they've been burned over and over, and me being at the head of the list.
Yeah, totally agree. We still have our sells to cover, players we want to get rid of off this Washington rosters, as well as the guys we're hanging on to. We'll do all that next.
Guys, you got to try Built Bars and Puffs. I've been telling you about this forever. If you're looking for a delicious snack and you don't want any of all the sugar and calories, well, who wouldn't want that? Then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever, and that's Built. You to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste. Built Bars, Built Puffs. They're healthy. They taste amazing. That's what's the crazy thing about them. They taste so good that you won't think that they're good for you. And the key to that, to me, is the 100% dark chocolate. And my wife is a chocolate snob and would never touch these bars with the plasticky, waxy chocolate, but she likes Built Bars because of the dark chocolate that's on them. They're 100% real. There's great flavors, churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. Not exactly sure how Built does it, but it does taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And they're super healthy for you. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait to get a box. I mean, for years, I've been telling you guys, go order Built Bars at Built.com, and you can still do that. You can still get all kinds of flavors at Built.com, but now you can get them at Walmart or Sam's Club. So walk into Walmart, walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puff. Or if you're at Sam's Club, run and grab a 13-bar box of the hit flavors Brownie Batter Puff and Churro Puff. Thank me later.
Matt, let's continue this conversation about the Washington roster. We're talking McLaurin, Dotson, kind of a crowded backfield all of a sudden. And that's where I want to start here as we look at players we're selling. I know the price tag is not going to be very high, but I'm ready to move on from Brian Robinson. He is the RB32 in our ADP data. I still like Antonio Gibson. I would rather have Gibson than Robinson even up, and the ADP suggests otherwise. Like I said, you're not getting much in trades. Looking at some recent ones, Brian Robinson and the 12 for the 7, so using him to get up to the 7, I actually love that type of deal. You look at 1-for-1 draft pick trades, he's bringing a second rounder. Someone got the 2-2. Someone else had to settle for the 2-10. Interesting one involving another Washington commander, Brian Robinson, and the 110 for Jahan Dotson. I'm good with that trade as well.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Essentially, I just like everybody else probably. I don't see much upside for Brian Robinson here. I think he's a fine running back, but I think he's got a pretty limited ceiling. And whether it's Antonio Gibson breaking out and overtaking him, or this team adding a running back next year, he's going to lose his job eventually. And I just want to get out while I can.
Yeah, you said that really well. He's going to lose his job eventually. It might even be week 2, or Dalvin Cook gets cut and ends up here, or maybe they pick up Zeke Elliott or Fournette or something messy. I mean, who knows? I think he's just a guy. He's a plotter. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought it was really interesting. And again, I'm trying not to be a homer. This is a couple of episodes this week where I've gotten to talk Wildcats. The Rodriguez edition is really interesting because he's basically a lot like Brian Robinson. He's a plotter. He's a big back, not a ton of speed. He is a power back. I don't know why you draft Chris Rodriguez when you already have Brian Robinson. I don't think that means they're necessarily unhappy with Robinson. Maybe they're just looking for some depth. But it was an odd landing spot, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. One thing I think we have to mention about Robinson, though, in his favor, because I don't know if I mentioned this, but he's my sell as well, because frankly, Logan Thomas doesn't count because you can't sell him for a penny at this point. So he would have been my sell if you get anything for him. But Robinson was also my sell. But one thing is, if I was his defensive attorney right now, I'd say, hey, guys, do you remember he got shot last year? Give him a break.
That was the time to sell, or maybe not that time, but right before that, because you'll remember he had been named starter. He had earned the starting job for Washington, and the hype was at an all-time high. And honestly, we were contributing to that because both of us really liked the player. I loved the situation as far as his opportunity to go in and earn the starting job and get some real playing time. And he did that and played well. I mean, I would say the same thing about Brian Robinson that I would say about Tyler Algier, that they're fine.
Yeah.
They're fine players. Right. Algier rushed for 1,000 yards as a rookie, and it wasn't enough to keep his starting spot as the Falcons opted for the talent of Bijan Robinson. And whether that means this Washington team eventually drafts a first round running back or they just grab one in free agency next year. Like I said, Robinson is eventually going to get pushed down the depth chart. So if you can get a second rounder for him, do it. If you can package him with something and get a young wide receiver like Jahan Dotson, do that as well. Chris Rodriguez, I'm taking a shot on him though in the 4th round of draft, something like that, just to see what happens.
Yeah, I hear you. And you're familiar with him, and he could probably do the Brian Robinson thing just as easily. I don't know. I'm almost sure Gibson's contract's up after this year. It makes me think in some way, shape, or form, the 2024 Commanders starting running back is not on the team right now.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that one. Matt, we have our hold left. We'll talk about the player on this Washington Commander team that we're hanging on to just to see what happens. We'll do that next. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Everydayers, check back tomorrow. Kate and Marcus will be back for their Friday mailbag. They will be answering your questions. Be sure to hit them up on Twitter with those questions, and they'll have some answers for you and your dynasty needs. Matt, let's finish up here. The Washington team, Washington Commanders, again, McLaurin, Dotson, Brian Robinson, Gibson, Curtis Samuel, Chris Rodriguez, and Sam Howell as the notable players on this team. Who's the guy you're hanging on to, your hold in dynasty leagues right now?
When we hit record on this episode, it was Dotson, but we've already talked him up, and I think he's more of a buy than a hold for me. He's a hold plus or whatever. So I'm going with Curtis Samuel. I mean, he's super cheap. He's wide receiver 88. He's teased us for years. I don't need him to be a 17-game starter, but Bieniemy plus Samuel might do some good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing about Curtis Samuel that we've said about so many other players, notably some running backs earlier this week. I just want him to stay healthy and stay on the field. He's that gadget guy. Washington doesn't have anyone else exactly like him. We thought Gibson might be like him, but they haven't really used him that way during his time in the league. So, he's unique to this offense. We just need him to stay healthy. He's hung on to that roster spot despite some additions to the team over the past couple of years. And he could still easily be the wide receiver 3 on this roster in 2023. So I really like that one. Wide receiver 88, you're not getting anything for him. I think you could definitely buy him for a third, maybe even, maybe even a late third potentially. So I like that call. I don't know if Terry McLaurin is my hold or not, but I think we've got to talk about him here. He's the most valuable member of this team in dynasty leagues. He is the wide receiver 24. I would say perpetually undervalued and overlooked in dynasty leagues. Maybe that's because he was not a first round pick in the NFL draft and was not necessarily highly thought of as an elite prospect coming into the league, but he's been an elite or near elite performer in his time in the league. What are your thoughts about Terry McLaurin?
I adore him. I mean, honestly, he's wide receiver 24 in Dynasty right now. I understand that. But if I were doing NFL wide receiver ranks right now, I can promise you McLaurin would end up 10 to 15. And he's not old. So I know his situation's not the Chiefs or the Bills, but I'm buying him at 24. I mean, there's no way there's 23 receivers I take ahead of him.
I don't know. We get into some depth, and this is really where the depth of the wide receiver position comes to light. Let's look at this. Let's look at those wide receiver 1 numbers. As a rookie, again, I would say had a solid rookie season, kind of like what I would say about Jahan Dotson following last year. McLaurin had 2 wide receiver 1 games way back in 2019. So that was 14% of his total games. 2020, 27% of his games were wide receiver 1 games. He gave us a total of 4 that season. It's steadily declined since then. 2021, 24% of his games. That was also represented 4 times. And then last year, 3 wide receiver 1 games, 18% of the time. And it just felt like the ceiling dropped a little bit for McLaurin. I don't know if that is due
He was a little frustrating last year. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that's due to the addition of Jahan Dotson. We already talked about the touchdown performance or production for Dotson. But yeah, you look at McLaurin's weekly stat line, he scored more than 20 fantasy points 2 times on the season. 2.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He did that 4 times the previous year. He did that 4 times the year before that. And in fact, one of those was 20.8 fantasy points. So if you use that 21 bar, he exceeded 21 fantasy points 1 time on the year. Can he bounce back?
Well, I certainly fear he's going to be, in this generation's Allen Robinson, DJ Moore.
I knew that's where you were going. Yeah.
What if he had a quarterback and before you know it, he's in year 8 and never has the quarterback? And when you watch the tape, though, he's open all the time. He's explosive. He's tough. Unfortunately, some people are better football players than fantasy football players, and he certainly qualifies. I think I'm going down with that ship, though.
Okay. Well, that's not a bad thing. You said you would, you feel like you could move him up in dynasty rankings or dynasty ADP. He is the wide receiver 24. Let's talk about the names above him to see if you change your mind there. Wide receiver 23, Jordan Addison. You want Addison or
McLaurin by far?
Okay. All right.
I don't think it's close. Yeah.
Chris Godwin is wide receiver 22. Godwin actually about half a year younger than Terry McLaurin.
I still would go McLaurin. I think Godwin's a nice value at that price, but boy, his situation's even worse than Washington's.
DJ Moore is the wide receiver 21.
Comparable, but McLaurin.
Michael Pittman, wide receiver 20.
McLaurin. But Pittman's also a buy for me.
Christian Watson is the wide receiver 19.
McLaurin.
Okay, so you're sticking to it. Then we're into the Deebo Samuel, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp range.
No.
Yeah, that's kind of where it stops, I think. So, yeah, you I don't know if I agree with you there, but you stuck with your original thought that you could move Terry McLaurin up a handful of spots at least. I don't know. You're down on Addison, huh?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I think he's fell into a great situation. I think even Pitt schemed him up a lot. His lack of size bothers me quite a bit. I think he'll always be Robin and not Batman, which is fine for the Vikes with Hawkinson, especially Jefferson there. I think McLaurin's a way better football player.
Well, that might be true, but that
doesn't
not all. It doesn't always matter. Yeah, I'll take Addison over McLaurin for sure.
How about those other names you rattled through?
I probably agree with you on the others. I think I'd take McLaurin over Godwin. I would still take DJ Moore. Oh, man, I don't really want Michael Pittman, honestly. Never been a big fan of his. So I think we could move Pittman up, we could move McLaurin up a couple spots at least. Anybody else on this team stand out as a player you want to hold, hang on to, and see what happens?
Kind of running out of names.
Yeah. You talked about Gibson would be the other one for me. Just because I still think he has upside. Hasn't really shown it at least the last couple of years. The value's dropped off, but I'm still holding on and hoping for a breakout season. And I wouldn't be shocked with that depth chart, as we already talked about, if he did regain that top spot.
Yeah, and he's been frustrating, but he's the best receiving back. He's the most talented back. And maybe he magically puts it all together in a contract year.
We were talking about Alexander Mattison on this week's DLF podcast, and with the Dalvin Cook questions, how Mattison is maybe a dynasty buy right now. Would you rather have Mattison or Gibson right now?
I don't think Cook will be a Viking, so Mattison. And again, I look at that very much through a redraft lens. If I'm on the clock in my redraft league, I think I take Mattison today over Gibson. But good conversation, and they both have a path.
Yep, I totally agree, and I'd take Mattison as well. But I think we could see both of those guys end up as starters for a big chunk of this season. That'll do it for today's show. Please make sure you download and subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Remember to follow the show at Locked On Dynasty. Follow Matt at Williamson NFL, and I'm Ryan MC23. We'll be back next time with more Locked On Dynasty.